1. So I grew up in Sweden, and this happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was out skating by myself on an abandoned guest parking lot, on the top floor, second floor of a building, and a closed secured garage below it for people who lived in the area. It's kind of secluded because the other buildings are not as tall, except for this one apartment complex right next to it, and no one parks there because at the time there were 2 car fires the same year before this day, and the cars were still there. Well, what was left of them. Don't know why no one bothered to clean it up. It was in the middle of a summer day, and I didn't think the parking lot was unsafe because my older brother and I were there all the time, skating with some friends. And also because we lived in the suburbs, where everyone knew each other. This day I was alone there because my brother and I fought like siblings do, and I needed to get out of the house. After a while I sat down to rest near an exit staircase, and I hear a car drive up, which is unusual, because like I said, it's abandoned, and no one dared to park there after the fires. And it stopped really close, like right next to me. I stood up and looked, and it was 4 men, 2 in the back and 2 in the front. The driver asks me in a playful tone, like an adult talking to a little kid, "Why are you here all alone, little girl?" So before I continue, my brother was always protective of me. When I couldn't swim, he made me wear floating armbands that kept me above water. Always made sure I wore a helmet when skating. And always talked about safety first. He thought I was a beautiful little girl with big green eyes and blonde hair, and he was always afraid of predators kidnapping me. So, he even taught me at a very young age to answer a stranger and how to think on my feet in case he wasn't with me. Cause this was back in the 90s when kids didn't have cell phones to call their parents. So I smiled and answered the driver, "I'm not alone. My brother is on his way here and he's getting us some beverages. He should be here any minute. You want some?" And I looked to the men in the back and see one of them holding something, trying to cover it with his hands between his legs. Yeah, that's how close they were. I could almost see the floor of the vehicle from where I was standing. And for a split second I see it's duct tape he's holding. The creepy part is that I remember that they didn't look like what you would imagine predators would look like. They all looked like average guys in their mid-20s to 30s that you see everywhere in the stores, streets, on the bus, your neighbor, etc. Although they weren't from the suburbs because I didn't recognize them. I've never seen them before and I never saw them again after this day. I was really naive because I didn't realize what was happening. I thought they were just being nice and I was only obeying my brother, answering like he wanted me to answer in case a stranger talks to me. But I had a bad feeling in my stomach. Like my naive brain thought they were nice because they were acting nice. But my instincts told me they weren't nice. The driver talks to me while the other men sat quietly. "Well, that's nice. Where do you live?" And I quickly answered, "I live in that apartment. My mom is right there." And I pointed to the small apartment complex right next to the parking lot, where the top floor, second floor, was at the same height as the parking lot was, like 10 to 15 meters across from where I was standing. And luckily, exactly where I was pointing was a random woman standing next to the window looking out. So I quickly waved to the random woman and smiled like I knew her. I don't remember if she saw us or waved back. Suddenly I hear loud steps walking near the bottom of the staircase behind me. I looked back at the driver and I gave him a huge smile and said, "That's probably my brother." And he had this surprised face like he got all caught in the act or something, while the others sunk down in their seats like they were hiding. And he said quickly while starting to drive, "Okay, you take care, little girl." And they drove off really fast. As soon as they left, I went straight home, 5 to 10 minute walk, because of the bad feeling, and sat down on the floor in front of the TV, started playing Donkey Kong Country, my favorite game at the time, on my brother's Super Nintendo, thinking in the back of my head while playing, why did they leave so fast? While still having that bad feeling in my stomach, I was really confused. I don't remember when I realized what could have happened, but I stopped going there by myself after that day. Today I still get chills thinking about the whole scene and how obvious these men were. Also thinking if another poor girl became victim instead of me. 'Cause there was a girl that went missing around the same year where I lived. I heard my mom talk about it a lot, feeling bad for the family and the girl. But I still have a hard time thinking it could have been these men. Maybe I'm being in denial. Don't know what scared them away though, if it was the random woman that maybe saw us and waved back, or it was the loud steps near the staircase that I lied about saying it was my brother coming back. Or maybe both. I love my brother, and even though at the time I thought he was annoying, nagging me about safety and thinking on my feet, it makes all the more sense now. He might have saved my life that day, and I'm really grateful having a big brother like that. Today I get to be 27 years old and a proud aunt to an adorable little boy that looks just like my brother when we were kids. My brother Daniel doesn't even know about this. I've never told him because I didn't want him to worry about me. 2. I just came back from dinner with my mom, and we talked about something that happened literally 20 years ago, and while we did, I thought it'd be a good story to share here. Now, before I can jump in, I need to sketch the surroundings a bit. At that time, my mom was 43 and I was 18. Also, our relationship wasn't very good. Admittedly, that was pretty much my fault. I was a rebellious teenager then, and important for the story, I was caught up in the metal scene, among other things, being the vocalist of a black metal band. Those inhuman screeches, it's actually a trick. Next to that, I had picked up a liking for weed. My mom stood out less, in attire and manners. Although, and yes, this is important too, she likes the color blue and had long blonde hair. Behind our own house stood a house owned by, I'm Belgian, my terms might be a bit off in this, social services, an organization that provided sheltered living. So there lived 3 men, Abe, Bart, and Carl. Abe and Bart were obviously in need of help, but completely harmless. Carl was, even in that company, special. Not on first sight, he was a rather diminutive guy who dressed well, but, well, if people are really detached from reality, you just have to look at their eyes to know. Now, Carl might have been heavily medicated. He was still batshit crazy. I don't know what really was the problem, I'm not a psychiatrist, but in a nutshell, he suffered religious delusions and was convinced that some people were angels, demons, or characters from the Bible. I didn't know that, but in hindsight, let me give you a random rundown how I looked when I returned home from a show. Long hair, a beard, rather muscular build, a black frock like monks wear, studded leather belt and arm bracelets, a big pentagram around my neck, and I went full out, corpse paint. So in short, after seeing me walk about like that a few times, and hearing the frequent arguments my mom and I had, Carl became convinced that I was a literal demon. And here comes the catch. My mom was the Virgin Mary. Blue clothes, long blonde hair, remember? Whom I wanted to abduct into hell. But he had his medication, and he wasn't a danger to anybody. Until a hot summer day I got a visit from the police because I had gotten in a fight. So what did my mom do? She invited the cops to sit in the yard while they talked to me. To Carl, that was somehow the straw that broke the camel's back. The cops leave. I succeed in convincing them I just happened to be near the fight, and my mom and I started arguing. At the same moment, Carl starts skipping his medication. A week later I have a show in a neighboring city, so around 3 a.m. I return. Because I wasn't stupid, I didn't drink or smoke before getting in my car, but I was planning on doing that afterwards. In the car there were 2 of my bandmates, Andres and Quentin. I go inside, my mom is fast asleep, and I get a few beers while they sit in the garden. Smoking had to happen outside, and it was pretty hot anyway. We sit, chat, smoke, drink, all is great, until Carl decides to act. "What the fuck?" said Andres. He pointed at the hedge at the end of our garden. All 3 of us, intoxicated by then, watch Carl, dressed in a white gown and with an aluminium circle on his head, wrestle himself through the hedge. "What do you think you're doing?" I said. "Begone, forces of evil!" he shouted, waving at us with a rather large cross, like as long as my arm. At that moment, I admit, we didn't know what to do. If you think about it, he probably took that as a sign his cross worked. So he runs to my open back door, my cue to run behind him, screaming at him to stop. He enters my house, shrieking that he's coming to save the Virgin Mary. Now it gets weird. My mom wakes up from all the shouting. She wore white PJs and her hair loose. Carl must have thought she descended from heaven. So he bolts it up the stairs, falls to his knees and starts praying. The 3 demons behind him are, strangely enough, not repelled. I grab him by his scrawny neck, totally ready to go medieval on him. I mean, we had our problems, sure, but this is my mom we're talking about. He jumps up, wrestles himself free, and manages to hit Quentin in the head with his cross. Andres and I back up, look at each other and nod. Carl is going down. "Stop," says my mom, as loud as she can. She walks up to Carl, takes his hand and says, "I think you're seeing this wrong." He looks up to her and starts crying. I mean ugly. Bawling. He tells her he wants to protect her from, points at us. Mom goes, I know, but that really isn't necessary." I whisper to Andres to call the cops downstairs, and stay there. Look, he's just a kid that likes to dress himself up. I don't really like it either, but it's a game. She motions at me, and I lose the frock and belt and stuff. Underneath, that stuff was heavy and it got hot. I'm only wearing my boxers. I wish I had a picture. Carl still on his knees crying. My mom is standing before him smiling. Quentin, in full garb, is sitting against the wall holding his head, and I'm standing in my boxers. I mean, you don't have to be crazy to get confused by that. Carl takes a deep breath. "But you're the Virgin Mary." "I'm just a nice lady," she says. "And they're my son and his friends, and you're Carl. It's all okay." He looks at me, then at my mom, stands up and grabs his cross. He looks at it and then says in an almost childish voice, "Didn't I tell you?" After which he makes his way downstairs, through the garden, through the hedge, and back to his own place. Somewhat later the cops show up. We explain everything, and the next day Carl moved out. That was the story about the one man I don't want to meet again, and how I learned that my mom is, underneath her appearance, brave and smart as fuck. To conclude, 2 days later his social worker paid us a visit, telling us what happened in Carl's mind leading up to that night, repeating over and over how happy they were that we were unharmed. By then my usual bragging teenage self said, "I would have dealt with him." The social worker shakes his head. Apparently Carl told him he didn't only have a cross, he also had a large kitchen knife under his gown. 3. A little bit before Christmas in 2015, my now ex and I moved about 12 kilometers away from the city we had been previously living in, to a house that we could rent cheaper, which was near the area I grew up in, without having to commute too far for work. In doing so, the cheaper rented accommodation was in a slightly dubious area, and we should have known better. We move in beside a couple who had a little boy, and from the first night we moved in, we could hear them arguing, and what sounded like her being beaten and strangled in between screaming. My ex runs out and knocks on the door to see if her and the child were okay. Bad move. He was met with a very hostile reaction from the man, getting up in his face, saying he needs to mind his own fucking business. The woman told him to get off her front porch, or they'll make him get off of it, blah blah blah. My ex just comes back inside and is like, WTF? Okay. We quickly realize their home is a drug den, with multiple zombie-looking folks going through their door on the daily, some of whom I recognized from over the years of us being teenage stoners, many of whom did not like me, nor my ex, over petty drama from years gone by. Fast forward a fortnight or so, with the screaming and violence going on most days and nights, and I drive home from work one evening to find 2 rubbish bins in the driveway that didn't belong to us. I presume they belonged to the neighbors, so I wheel them over to the front of their house. My ex gets back a little after me and finds the bins at the front door and asks what they're doing there, and I tell him they had been there earlier too. He wheels them back over to the neighbor's door. We go away for a couple of hours and come back to find the bins back in our driveway yet again. So this time we both go over and knock on the neighbor's door, asking what the fuck they're doing with their bins. And the man comes out saying, "What the fuck little game do you two think you're playing at taking our bins? You have no idea who you're messing around with. Nobody takes my property and questions me about it. Watch your back," etc., and goes back inside. Our houses were attached, so you could hear loud and obviously aggressive talking going on, presumably about us and whoever else was in the house at the time. A few of the men shone lights in our windows and stood outside our house, looking up and banging at the windows and from inside their house walls all night, until at some point we must have given up worrying about it and fallen asleep. The next night, about 9:30 p.m., I hear a lot of commotion outside, and someone pounding hard on the door. I open the door and 3 men are standing there, shouting at me, and the guy from next door saying, "Where's your boyfriend? What did I tell you both about stealing from me? You took our coal." At this point my boyfriend, who was in the shower upstairs, is coming downstairs in a bathrobe. I'm obviously saying, and pretty much laughing, "Why on earth would we take a bag of coal? You cannot possibly be fucking serious." And he's all, "Oh yeah? Well, what's that in your back garden, huh?" And I go through to the back garden and sure enough, there's a bag of coal lying there. I say, "You obviously fucking planted it there." My boyfriend starts shouting, saying, "Get a life, leave us alone. I can see what you're trying to do, just fuck off." Shuts the door and locks it and throws the bag of coal back over the fence to their garden. Multiple people from the house then once again proceeded to shine lights, to intimidate us, into the front and back windows. At the back of our houses there was a little hill so you could see straight in from the back, for the next maybe half an hour or so. The woman who lived next door obviously returned from wherever she had been, and we can hear her voice booming from outside, screaming something along the lines of, "Come outside here, I'm going to kill you," and saying, put in the windows now." My boyfriend angrily unlocks and opens the door, and a bunch of the guys force their way in and pull him out of the house. 4 of the guys jump him and start beating him. Others smashed my car windows, slashed my tires, and put in the front windows of our house. The woman sent out a younger scumbag girl to attack me, but thankfully the girl was a lanky twig like me and kind of gave up after I was clawing at her aimlessly, whilst hysterically screaming and crying at what they were doing to my boyfriend. The quiet elderly couple who lived in the house next to theirs had thankfully called the police, and after they arrived an ambulance was called for my boyfriend, who was taken to hospital. And after talking to the police, what I could gather is that they had broken the handle off their back door, smashed the glass on the door, messed up their entire kitchen, and said that my boyfriend had broken in and was violent towards their child and hurt him. Stole money and other shit from their house, then took their bag of coal and left it laying in our garden. All I could think of was, so my boyfriend supposedly did all of this, while a bunch of men are all in the house just sitting around while this is happening. I called our landlord, who arrived pretty much immediately after I called. At this point it's pretty late at night, and he brings his son and brother with him, who are basically standing guard, and he told me that he has so many problems with these people before. Thanks for the heads up, and people often move out early because of them. That the guy and woman have lengthy criminal records, and that their own landlord is literally scared to force them out because of the threats he has received from them in the past. That they're in massive arrears, and that they have threatened the older couple who live beside them too. My landlord and his family help me bag every single thing we own, clears the place and makes multiple runs with me and all of our stuff back to a friend's place that we would have to stay with temporarily. The next morning he returned our deposit, and also gave me the month's rent we had paid back, saying I would need it to sort out the windows on my car, etc., which he had removed from the driveway and taken to my friend's place. At least the landlord was nice. They had broken my boyfriend's nose, which he needed surgery for, but other than that he was, thankfully, just very battered and bruised, with a swollen face and black eyes. We were harassed by them and their friends on Facebook for a few weeks following the incident, And they had even put up statuses about us on Facebook, saying all the awful things my boyfriend had done to them. They had taken pictures of us at some point too, because they had attached pictures of us to the statuses to alert people as to what we looked like. Be careful of these people. Making themselves out to be the victim. We were easily more than a decade younger than them. Anyway, fast forward to today, and the guy is locked up for something or other. Their child is in care, thank goodness. The poor little guy looked so uncared for, pale and sad. And I don't know what she is up to other than uploading Shrek-looking selfies to the internet. I know this isn't a creepy story, but scumbag insane neighbors who attacked us for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Let's not meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 322. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'm just going to keep this brief. I just want to say thank you very much to all the feedback you left for me on Friday's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to head off for now because I've got a lot of recording still to do, and I want to make sure I split it between 2 days, so I'm not overstressing myself. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.